Part 1. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1. MRSGN walked to the door of the school's kitchen lightly with the basket on her back, took the sister-in-law out of the basket and placed it on the threshold, and whispered, "Manbao, you sit here, sister-in-law will cook, and in a while take you home again." Manbao nodded obediently, and when her sister-in-law turned around and entered the kitchen, she ran towards the classroom next to her with her short legs. The children inside are reading 1,000 characters under the guidance of Mr. Manbao, who is familiar with the road and drags a stone under the window, then steps on the stone and probes into it, staring at it with shining eyes like stars. "Look inside." Sitting not far from the window, Bai Erlang shook his head and noticed Manbao's sight, so he secretly turned his head and glared at her fiercely. Not to be outdone, Manbao glared back and made a face at him. Bai Erlang's eyes widened angrily. The husband just walked by, patted his head lightly with his hand, and reprimanded, "Be more serious." Manbao couldn't help but be happy when he saw it. He was very happy. Seeing his husband looking over, he even winked at him mischievously. The grey-bearded gentleman couldn't help shaking his head and sighing. He ignored her and let her lie at the window and listen to them reading. "Mister, today we are going to study the last paragraph of 1,000-character writing, Mao Shi Shizi, a smile with a smile, every reminder of the year, Ziwi, bright and bright, ignorant, ignorant, and so on." The students recited one sentence after another, and Manbao stood outside the window and shouted along with the little milk voice. The voice was quite loud, and the students in the classroom were used to it, shaking their heads and reciting to the husband. Manbao began to read 1,000 characters since he could speak. He had memorized this text a long time ago. Seeing that the teacher put down the book and let the elementary school students read it over and over again, he paced to the other side of the older children to teach them something else. Manbao he jumped off the stone and ran to the husband's house. When the husband announced the dismissal of school and was pacing back to the apartment next door, he saw that Manbao had already cleaned the front door with a broom, and was sitting on the ground sorting out the manuscripts he had thrown away. Seeing Mr. come back, Manbao happily showed him the finished manuscript. "Look, sir, these backs are still available. This is what I wrote when I wrote it, and you can take it back if you want." Manbao shook his head. "The back can be used to practice calligraphy, sir. You can use it to practice calligraphy first, and I'll take it back when the back is full." The husband couldn't beat her, so he could only take the manuscript and put it on the table. He pointed to another pile of manuscripts full of words and said, "Take these back. If you have any words you don't understand, ask me." Manbao happily responded, folded the stack of papers and stuffed it in his arms, and happily jumped to the kitchen to find her sister-in-law. Mr. Qian has already prepared all the meals and is feeding the children. Manbao slipped into the kitchen, greeted his sister-in-law, and brought his husband's meal to him. The gentleman pointed to the mat opposite and said, "Sit down and use it together." Manbao shook his head. "I'll go to the kitchen to eat in a while. This is from Mr. Sir, let's eat." The husband didn't force it. He took a piece of meat and handed it to her mouth. Manbao happily ate it, but couldn't sit still here, and ran out after playing for a while. The husband smiled and shook his head, not calling her. Manbao ran to the kitchen, and when Xiao Qian saw her, he scraped off the remaining pot at the bottom of the pot and put it in a bowl for her to eat. Manbao obediently grabbed the pot and stuffed it into his mouth, and even broke a piece and stuffed it into his sister-in-law's mouth. Xiao Qian smiled and pushed while eating, you can eat it, it's not much. There is only one pot of rice, and the rice is so small. If too much rice is burned, the students will not be full, and she may be fired from this job. Xiao Qian has been a cook in the school for 3 years, and he is very good at this point. Mr. Zhuang is a teacher invited by the head of the village, Mr. Bai. This school is also a school built by the Bai family who donated money. At the beginning, Mr. Zhuang taught here with his old wife and children. Because there were children from 2 nearby villages who came to study here, he could not go home for lunch at noon. Mr. Zhuang took pity on them when they were hungry. After receiving 6 caddies of rice and paying 30 cents, you can have lunch in the school. The kitchen of the school was initially managed by Mr. Zhuang's old wife. She and the villagers bought some vegetables, rice brought by the students, and occasionally some meat, chopped and boiled for everyone to eat. 30 pennies, the right to pay for their hard work. The parents have an account in their hearts and know that Mr. Zhuang does not make any money for them. He is completely pity for the students. The children also have to eat when they go home, so they are very happy to give this ration, even to the students who live in the village. Rice. Later, Mr. Zhuang's old wife died of serious illness, and his grandchildren were brought into the city by his sons and daughters-in-law to live in the city. He was left to teach here alone. No one did the work, so Mr. Zhuang took out 100 yuan by himself. Asked Mr. Qian to be the cook. After landlord Bai found out, he asked Xiao Qian to return the money to Mr. Zhuang, and his family took out the money to invite Xiao Qian, and took over all the money and rice that the students handed in, so that Mr. Zhuang could teach with peace of mind. At that time, Man Bao was only 8 months old and could not even walk. Xiao Qian's main task was to take care of Man Bao and his youngest son, 3 heads, so he often put the 2 children in the back basket and brought them to the school kitchen, and occasionally removed them from the pot. Pinch out a rice ball for the 2 of them to eat, and raise them very well. It's just that Santu is now 4 years old, and he doesn't like coming to school, but prefers to play with his brothers and sisters, so now only Man Bao is with Xiao Qian. Although it is only a little bit of rice cakes every day, but it also raises Man Bao to be white and plump. Man Bao and sister-in-law finished dividing the pot and washed the pots and bowls, and then went home. Xiao Qian wanted to put her in the basket, but Man Bao was not happy and ran aside and said, "I can walk by myself." Xiao Qian did not force her. "Okay, you can go by yourself, just don't fall." "I'm already an older child, so I won't fall," Man Bao shouted and ran forward. From a distance, she saw a group of people around the door of the house. She was about to rush over happily when she heard the sound from inside. With a scream, she was terrified. Little Qian realized that something was wrong earlier than her, hugged her and rushed forward. When the crowd saw Xiao Qian's, he immediately gave way. "Zhou's sister-in-law is back, let go, let go. Sister-in-law Zhou, your 4th uncle lost the bet, and someone came to you." There are those who tip off the news, and there are those who gloat over the misfortune. The dead is not young or old, and looking at the old Zhutu's posture, he is going to kill the child. Please persuade Mrs. Zhou, if you don't have money, you can earn it, but if you don't have people, it's true. Is gone. Xiao Qian's heart was trembling, and he pushed through the crowd to go home. He saw that the 4th uncle was being pushed to the ground by the 2nd and 3rd children, and the father-in-law was holding a pole to greet him. And there were more than 10 strangers standing in the yard. The one headed by a bad expression interrupted the old man Zhou's angry shout, "Master Zhou, even if you beat your son to death, you have to return the money to me today, or else isn't it a waste of time for our brothers to come over the mountains and mountains?" Man Bao broke free from Xiao Qian's arms, ran to her father's side, looked at her unsatisfactory 4th brother, and looked at the people around him, frowned and asked, "Dad, how much did the 4th brother bet?" "Money." The young man at the head looked at Man Bao in astonishment, and said, "Hey, Master Zhou, your daughter is good looking. If the family doesn't have money, you can use the child to offset the debt. Although she is a little small, but we don't mind." Old man Zhou was so angry that he pushed his daughter behind him and said angrily, "If you want someone to drag this beast away, he will pay back the money he owes." Thursday Lang howled and shouted, "Dad, Daddy, you save me, Daddy, I really don't dare, I don't dare anymore. If you want them to drag me away, they will beat me to death, it would really kill me. The young man at the head glanced at the old man Zhou, sneered, and directly stretched out his feet and stepped on the hands of Shishulang and crushed him. Shishulang screamed miserably. Seeing that the old man Zhou's face became more and more blue and pale, he smiled with satisfaction. Isn't it only 15 taels of silver? Look at your new house, it doesn't look like you have no money. No matter how bad it is, there are still so many girls' movies. Just sell me two, but I said in advance that the girls' film is worthless now, you must have your little daughter in it, otherwise, it will only be 3 or 5 taels, and there are not 4 that can't be written off. As soon as these words came out, Xiao Qian and Feng were so frightened that they pulled their daughter back, and they were the only 2 in the family who had daughters. Old man Zhou was so angry that his hands and feet trembled, and Thursday Lang was also frightened and scared. He almost couldn't help but wet his pants. He could only grab the corner of Dad's clothes with the other hand that was not stepped on, and pleaded, "Dad, Dad, please save me, I really don't dare anymore, I don't dare anymore." Zhou Lang, who was holding him, couldn't help reaching out to beat him. It had only been a long time since life at home had been better, and it was all broken by him. And he has 2 daughters, if he really wants to sell children. Thinking of this on Tuesday, Lang beat him harder. "I told you to be disobedient, I told you to disobey." Thursday Lang held his head and begged for mercy. Man Bao watched, the corners of his mouth pursed tightly, turned to look at her 3 nieces, turned and ran towards the house. Her mother, Qian Shi, was leaning on the bed and stroking her chest, and the 6th brother was supporting her worriedly. Her mother's health has always been bad, and now she is probably frightened. Man Bao ran over and asked, "Mother, how much money does our family have?" Qian opened her eyes to look at the little girl, and couldn't help but wipe away her tears. "Why are you asking this? Is there enough money to pay the debt?" Qian Shi cried, "The one who killed Qiandao should have drowned when he gave birth to your 4th brother. The family is full of things and it's still 4 or 5 taels short." Man Bao asked, "Then let them drag the 4th brother away. They have come all the way over the mountains. If they don't give you a penny, they can beat your 4th brother to death if you can't get out of the village. Do we still have the heart to watch him die?" Qian understands this principle, and it is even more impossible for the olds Hutu to understand it. Now he is just reluctant. Man Bao emphasized with a serious face, "You can't sell your niece." Qian rubbed her head and said, "If you don't sell it, you will sell your 4th brother, and you won't sell them either, that wicked beast. I'm publishing a new book, please support me." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2. Qian Shi was almost out of tears, and he was out of breath. He opened the box, took out a box from the bottom, and opened it to show the money inside to his younger son and daughter. Inside were strings of money, which were quite heavy, with only 2 small pieces of silver, which was left over from the house. The only thing he kept in his house was copper coins. Seeing the money, Qian couldn't help but wipe away tears. She counted the money again and again and again, and found that there were only 9 coins, and the 2 pieces of silver added up to 1 or 2 halves. Qian Shi also took out the money box in the bedside table, which contained money for daily use. This time was just in time for the autumn harvest. The 3rd and 4th went to the white landlord's house to help. She hadn't counted the money that came up and put it in the locker. But this part of the money is not much, and there are also several strings in a string of 100 cents, and a string of 10 strings. They were really unlucky. There were only 6 strings of money in the string, and there were 20 to 30 coins of loose money left at the bottom of the box. Qian looked at her daughter and then at her younger son, and when she heard the screams getting louder and louder outside, she got up and gave all the money to her younger son to carry out, and helped her little daughter out by herself. Seeing his mother come out with the money box in his arms, Xu Yulang breathed a sigh of relief and almost burst into tears. Man Bao could see clearly and was very angry with the fourth brother. There are also gamblers in the village. The third household of their family used to be the Uncle Wednesday. His son lost a bet half a year ago. He brought the people from the casino back and sold his wife and children to the account. Their eldest niece is 2 years older than her and is a good friend with her, so she remembered that gambling is a fatal thing. She doesn't know if it will kill her, but she will definitely kill her relatives. At that time, my father and mother had taught my brothers and strictly ordered them not to gamble. I didn't expect it to be their turn now. Full of anger, he rushed forward and stretched out his foot and stomped on Shiro Lang, and stepped on his face. Shiro shouted hey and shouted, "Young sister, Yaomei, don't step on me, I know I'm wrong." Qian didn't stop her, but said to her husband, "The money is not enough, it's still 4 or 2.5. Old man Zhou frowned sadly, while Qian looked at his 3 daughters-in-law, and said, "Please take out how much you have in your family. It is your fourth brother who borrowed it from you, and he will let him pay it back later." Mrs Qian, Mrs Feng and Mrs He went to see their husbands, and when they saw their ugly faces, they took their children back to the house to get the money. The Zhou family is not divided. All the money they make must be handed over to the public. The food and drink are all owned by the public. The Qian family and the old man Zhou said a long time ago that if they want to divide the family, unless they die, they will have to wait for all the children. Just get married. But the Qian family also knew that sons who got married were different from those who didn't, and they had to have some money on hand. Therefore, her hands have always been loose, and she keeps all the harvests in the fields, but she only takes 60% of the money earned by each family in other ways, and the remaining 40% is collected by each family. For example, in the big room, the little Qian family has a job as a cook in the school, and earns at least 100 yuan a month. Except for the 60 yuan to be handed in, the rest of the money is her own. Another example is the second room. The second child secretly learned a little carpentry craftsmanship when he went to help the white landlord's house in his early years, and also weaved 10 bamboo. In his spare time, when he weaved things, he could take it to the market for a little money. Another example is the third room. The third child spares no effort to work. The steward of my landlord's family likes to use him the most. He calls him whenever he has a job, so he can also earn some money. As for the remaining 3 youngest sons, the fourth one can't count on them. They are lying on the ground. The fifth and sixth are not very old. If they have money, they will either be coaxed away by their mother or their sister, or they will beg for the second. Brother went to the market to buy candy. Even if he searched all the clothes, he probably couldn't find 2 cents. The Qian family stopped searching for them. The daughters-in-law of the 3 families quickly took out the money from their own private house. The Qian family looked at the head of the family and several sons. Xiao Qian couldn't bear it at first, so he sat on the ground directly, patted his legs and said, "Mother, there's really no more. We took out all the money for the Mid-Autumn Festival cakes prepared for the mother's family. This is going to break the family." "What?" She was so angry that she patted her. "Why are you crying? My mother is not dead yet. You have survived the disaster year, and you are still afraid of these 200 yuan. Man Bao thought for a while, then ran back to the main house, took out a silver lock from his treasure box, and took it out to Qian. "Mother, use mine." Qian's complexion changed greatly, and he immediately grabbed the silver lock and put it in his arms, and said angrily, "This thing can't be given. This is what your father and mother beat you. The Taoist priest said that your life is expensive, and you have to have something to hold it back. Come on, this is for your life." Old man Zhou also said, "I can't give it." The thug laughed angrily. "Co-authoring a long life lock is heavier than your son's life. I said, whether you give it or not, it seems that the second half is ringing." We still have to go back to the county seat. A night's board and lodging. The thugs behind him moved instantly and began to flip and kick around in the yard. Hurry up and give the money, it's only natural to pay the debt. People from the casino have always come to the door with nothing. How could Joe Dallin allow them to rummage the house and hurriedly stop it? Tuesday Lang and Wednesday Lang stopped holding on to Thursday Lang, and hurriedly went to help Big Brother. Friday Lang and Saturday Lang also followed their brothers enthusiastically. The villagers of Kilai village, of course, could not see that the villagers were being bullied, and they also stepped forward to pull. Not to mention, it was the first time that the thugs saw so many brothers in the gambler's family. They didn't dare to go too far when they saw the villagers surrounding them. They just wanted to push me and I pushed you, but I couldn't help but get angry. Teng teng up. Seeing this, the village chief sighed and stopped everyone. Okay, don't you have 200 when short, Uncle Jin, I'll lend it to you first, and remember to pay me back later. After all, let the son go home to withdraw the money. The money collected in this way filled the box. Except for the 2 small pieces of silver, it was all copper plates. The thugs didn't dislike it, and they directly counted the copper coins and put them in the bag on their back. He just threw pieces of silver in the end and said, "This silver can be exchanged for more than this amount of copper. You should also know that in the bank, these 2 pieces of silver can now be exchanged for 12 strings of money, so." Joe Dallin stepped forward and kicked Thursday Lang directly, and asked, "Are you betting on copper or silver?" "Copper plate, copper plate." Joe Dallin directly squeezed his fist and beat him, and asked angrily, "Is it a copper plate, is it a copper plate?" On Thursday, Lang's nose was bruised and his face was swollen, with nosebleeds hanging from his nose and screaming, "It's a copper plate, it's a copper plate." Joe Dallin didn't stop, his fists landed on his face, and he asked with a livid face, "Is it a copper plate, is it a copper plate?" On Thursday, Lang cried and called his mother, "It's a copper plate, brother, it's a copper plate." They lied to you, and they lied to you. When the thugs saw that Joe Dallin did not spare a bit of effort, and that Thursday was beaten like this, they couldn't help embarrassing him. "Turn around and leave." On Tuesday, Lang stood in front of them and asked, "Where's the IOU?" The thug pouted, gave him the IOU, patted him on the shoulder and said, "People like you can't be blocked, it's best to keep an eye on your brothers, or your luck may not be so good next time. In this world, because there are a lot of people who gamblers are ruined." Several brothers from the Joe family looked at Thursday Lang unkindly. Thursday Lang curled up on the ground, seeing the eyes of his brothers, buried his head and didn't dare to cry too loudly. The thugs finally left. The old man Joe and the eldest son laughed and sent the villagers away, thanking them for their help, especially the village chief, who repeatedly expressed that they would find time to invite him to a meal. When the person was sent away, the old man Joe told Josiah Liu to close the door, turned around and picked up the pole and continued to pump his son. The Qian family was afraid that the little girl would be frightened, so she brought her back to the house in advance, but the effect was not great, because the child kicked off his shoes and climbed into his bed, lying on the window and looking out, watching her father beat her 4th brother, watching have relish. Qian's health was not good. After all this tossing, he was sad and tired. He didn't stop his daughter-in-law, and let the 3 daughters-in-law go to the kitchen to make some food. From the morning to now, they haven't eaten a grain of rice. Come on, a few kids can't stand it. When the arrangements were made, I called the little girl over, brought the silver lock to her, and said, "Didn't I tell you not to take it off? This is what your parents gave you to control your life, and you won't be allowed to take it off in the future, you know." Man Bao said awkwardly, "It's uncomfortable to wear." Qian thought for a while and said, "You don't have to wear it at night, but you must wear it during the day." Man Bao reluctantly responded. Seeing her mother's sad face, she asked, "Mother, What about fourth brother? Don't care about him, let your father beat him. It's only been a few years before he learns to gamble. It's a broken thing, and it deserves to be beaten to death. Man Bao said, if you kill it, it's better to kill the people in the casino. We also saved money. Qianshi choked and said, you child, this mouth is like your father's, and it's not forgiving at all. Hey, is my dad so smart? Qianshi didn't answer her question, but said, then he has to fight. If he doesn't fight, he won't have a long memory. If he commits another crime in the future, how much money can the family give him to defeat? Fourth brother remembers to eat or not to beat. It's useless to beat him, unless he breaks his leg and makes him unable to walk. That won't work, we have to take care of him in the future. Qianshi was also afraid that Lao Zhutu would break his son, sighed, and shouted out the window, okay, if you are disabled, you will have to pay for medical bills. There's no money left. The crackling noise from the outside slowly disappeared. Old man Joe stared at the son in disgust, kicked him and asked the eldest and second child to drag him back to the room. Man Bao said to her mother in the room, Mother, I have a good idea, I can punish him without costing the family money. What's the idea? Let the fourth brother go to the wasteland, and then let him grow things on the wasteland and use the money to pay back the family and the brothers and sisters-in-law. He owes the family and the brothers and sisters 15 taels of silver. Qianshi was very puzzled, reclaiming wasteland? Why did you think of reclaiming wasteland? Man Bao said, isn't it what the village chief said, the Yamen let us open up wasteland, and all the land we open up is ours, and we don't collect taxes for the first 3 years. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3. Qian rubbed her head and said, how easy is it to open up wasteland, and the grain grown in the wasteland may not be enough to pay taxes. Your nephews are still young, and the land at home is enough to grow. Then what should I do? The fourth brother made such a big mistake, and he can't be killed. What if he goes to gamble when he is free? Qianshi pondered, if Shiro did not punish such a big mistake, the other sons and daughter-in-law in the family would definitely not accept it. That's the real heartache. Qian said, okay, tomorrow, let your fourth brother go to the land to open up wasteland. Only then did Man Bao become happy, I'm going to supervise the fourth brother. I think you want to go out to play. There are many snakes and worms in the ground, so don't join in the fun. Just let your eldest nephew and the others follow. Man Bao, no, I'm going to. In the past, she felt that her family was pretty good. She didn't lack food and clothing. She had candy to eat on market days, although she didn't like candy very much. So she just wanted to learn to read before. She felt that being able to read and read made her very happy, but Keek had no books for her, so she could only give her sugar. She had eaten them, and although those candies were sweeter than the ones the second brother brought back from the market, she still didn't like them very much. But she now knows that their family is still very poor, and she has to earn money. She is still young and can't work in the fields or go out to work. The only way to make money is to sell sugar. But because she was always lazy, she didn't dig vegetables for Keek, and Keek didn't give her candy for a long time. By the way, Keek was something that suddenly appeared in her mind. It was last spring that she finally memorized the 1,000-character text in its entirety. Mr. Zhuang was very moved and copied a stack of 1,000-character text by himself. The manuscript was sent to her. She happily ran home with the manuscript, and as soon as she got home, Keek appeared. It said that it was a branch of the encyclopedia, in charge of the biology department, and was accidentally lost here. It needs to collect a lot of biological species in exchange for energy to leave in the encyclopedia. At first, Manbao didn't understand, she just thought she had a friend, and she was very happy to tell her mother. It's just that she thought she was a child and dreamed and coaxed her for a while. Manbao is very smart, and gradually realized that others can't see or hear Keek, so she doesn't mention it anymore, she just thinks that this friend can only be seen and heard by herself. Keek kept begging her to collect more plants, but Manbao had dug up all the vegetables in the vegetable garden for him to collect, and even dug the grass outside the house. Walking too far was tiring, and she didn't want to go at all. For the sake of her friends, she reluctantly went to find Zyako she hadn't seen before for Keek, but her family always worried that she was running outside. Usually, her nephews and nieces could go out to play, but she was always taken by her sister-in-law. At most, you can only play in the village, and you can never leave the village, let alone the fields. Manbao was pestering her mother, so she almost rolled on the ground. She was exhausted physically and mentally today. Seeing her daughter like this, thinking that she is not too young, it was the most fun time, and she couldn't bear to restrain her all the time. He nodded reluctantly and said, "Okay, let's go, but you have to listen to Goro Rokuro's words, don't run around, and don't stay in the sun for too long, you know." Manbao happily agreed. In the evening, I also ate a bowl full of rice, and I rushed to eat up the dishes with my fifth and sixth brothers, nephews, and nieces. Apart from these few young children, the adult's appetite is really not very good. After saving a little money at home, they return to extreme poverty overnight. It's no wonder that they are in a good mood. Old Man Joe picked up the rice with chopsticks. For the first time, he felt that the food was blocked and he couldn't eat it. When he thought of the 15 taels of silver, his heart throbbed and his eyes were red with pain. In the end, he couldn't help but threw the bowl and beat his fourth son. After their father beat the fourth child, Joe Dallin and the others couldn't follow along, so they could only smack their faces. The porridge that Jian and his daughters-in-law ate together. Now that the autumn harvest is over, the family can only eat dry food except for men. Full. But after putting down his chopsticks, Mrsgn said, "I don't have a penny left in my family. I'm in a panic. From tomorrow onwards, I won't do anything dry at home. I'll make it thin. The eldest daughter-in-law will put in less rice in the future. Winter is coming, and there are 2 seasons, spring and summer." Mr. Qian bowed his head in response. Glancing at Manbao, he asked, "What about the little girl? She is weak and eats too thin." Qian raised his eyebrows and said, "Tomorrow, you will bring 6 caddies of food to the school, and ask the boss to ask Mr. Zhuang. After that, Manbao will have lunch in the school, and the vegetables will be bought from their own vegetable fields. You just need to cut 2 more." Xiao Qian responded and quickly finished eating with his sister-in-law and his sister-in-law. Manbao felt that it was not good, and asked, "Mother, what about Da Ya and the others?" She reached out and touched her head, and said with a smile, "Da Ya and the others are in good health, so you don't need to eat dry food. If you are in poor health, eat more, or if you get sick, your family will have to pay for medicines for you." Da Ya and Da Tio you have been instilled with this idea since they were young. Grandpa, Grandma, and Mother told them from a young age that the little girl was not in good health, and they were not allowed to push her or bully her. They should give her more food and gain weight so that she would not get sick. Otherwise, they have to spend money to buy medicine when they are sick, and then they will have no money to buy sugar. So since I was a child, I had no opinion on what my sister-in-law ate with her grandfather and father. And the little aunt is also very good to them. She is younger than them, but she always gives them candy. They still like the little aunt very much. So when Grandma came over at this time, they nodded again and again, saying that "Auntie, you should eat more, we can just eat thin at home. There are still some cereal skewers in the field, we'll go back and find them and bake them." "No, Tomorrow we are going to help the fourth brother open up the wasteland, Man Bao said, but we can find wild fruits to eat. Old Jotio Yu looked at Man Bao, reclamation. Qian said, I forgot to tell you guys that tomorrow I will let the fourth child go to open up wasteland. He owes money to his family, so he always has to make a living. Old Zhutu didn't think that land reclamation could make any money, but that's fine, lest the kid be idle and want to gamble, so he still had to find something to do for him. So he said, the fifth, the sixth, you all come with me tomorrow. If he is lazy, I will beat him. Man Bao volunteered, Dad, if I come, the fifth and sixth brothers will definitely not be able to beat the fourth. Lao Zhutu smiled, reached out and touched her head with a smile, okay, come here, if your fourth brother dares to be disobedient, you will beat him with a stick. Man Bao was as happy as if he had received the imperial decree. He went to bed early at night, and promised in his mind that Keek would help him find plants that he had not found before, and asked, you must prepare me more sugar, I to sell. The system was so worried. The plants that Manbao recorded were very common. After more than a year, the benefits were not seen. Instead, it had to exchange the points left over from the past for sugar to her. It's not good if you don't change it. This is a little dull. If it wasn't for the candy hanging in front of her, she wouldn't play this game with it. Yes, Manbao has always regarded this as a game, and never thought of using it to reach the pinnacle of life and achieve any extraordinary life goals. It has been more than a year, and the system's ambitions have been honed. Fortunately, it is bound to the host. Even if there is no energy to support it to leave this space and return to its original plane, it can keep running. Just wait until the host is bigger. This is the system's comfort to itself. No matter how bad it is, the worst result is that when the host dies, it will just choose a more ambitious host. The system quietly grabbed her remaining points, calculating how much sugar she could exchange for her. Manbao thought that he had made an agreement with Keek, so he dragged his own quilt to cover it, closed his eyes and fell asleep beautifully. The next day, not long after the chickens were crowing, there was a sound in the yard. Manbao rolled over, burrowed into the quilt with his little butt on his back, and continued to sleep. Farmers always get up early. Even if the autumn harvest is over, the land has to rest. Moreover, Joe Dallin, Tuesday Lang and Wednesday Lang all took over the work at Bai landlord's house, and they also had to go out. Waiting for the sound of ouch and slaps from the yard, Manbao finally rubbed her eyes and got up. She blushed and went to push the window, and saw that her father was pulling the fourth brother out of the house and kicked him with one foot. Driven out to work on his ass, she immediately remembered what she promised Coco last night. Not wanting to sleep anymore, Manbao immediately got out of bed and put on his clothes, then ran out and said, "Fourth brother, wait for me, I'll go with you." She grabbed her and said, "No hurry, wash your face first. Breakfast wasn't so early, and we had to wait until the sun was in the middle of the sky before we could eat it." Xiao Qian asked my sister-in-law to wash her face and poured her a bowl of boiled water. Then she touched an egg and washed it up for her to drink. Manbao drank the egg water with disgust on his face, turned around and ran after the fourth brother. Wulang and the others were standing at the door waiting for her. In the morning, egg water was Manbao's welfare, even Lao Zhutu and Qian did not have it. It is said that the little ant almost died of illness, and she survived by relying on egg water. Since then, she has never been able to beat an egg, and whoever loses her will not lose her. The family didn't want to open up any good land for Shai Zilang to open up wasteland, so in addition to the master of Shai Zuolang, they also sent a group of children to help him. For example, Wulang, Liaolang, the big head and the big girl of the big room, and the second girl and the second head of the second room. Goro is 14 this year and Rokuro is 12. They are both big boys. In the words of the village, they can already say kisses, and they will be able to give birth to big fat boys by themselves in 2 years. Datu and Ertu are Manbao's nephews, one is 9 years old and the other is 6 years old, while Da Yat and Yat are Manbao's nieces, one is 8 years old and the other is 7 years old. There is also Santu from the big room. He is also a nephew. He is the same age as Manbao. He also wanted to go today, but his mother stopped him. He had to take Sanya and Situ to the vegetable garden to pull weeds. Sanya is a 2-bedroom, and Situ is a 3rd bedroom. They are all very young, all 4 years old. The road is not easy to walk, so they can only pull weeds at home. The mountain road was rough, and it was not easy for Manbao to walk, so Goro and Rokuro took turns to carry her. Shiro didn't have to think about it. He was injured and he was able to walk to the ground by himself. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 4. They have a total of 68 households in Kilai village and they monopolize this large area, on the hillside, just open up wasteland. And there are very few wastelands on the flat ground, and some of them are mostly soil and stone, and they are still barren. From a distance, open whichever piece is pleasing to the eye at that time. Thursday Lang thinks willfully, but will Manbao agree? Of course not. Manbao was carried on his back to the top of the mountain, and Thursday, Lang looked at it, pointed to a mountainside with the least grass, and said, "Let's go there and open a block." No, Manbao refused without thinking, pointed to another tunnel on the slope and said, "I want to drive that one." Zhou Hulang looked at it and found that not only the grass was very lush, growing as tall as Manbao, but there were also many low shrubs. He also knew how difficult it would be to dig out those roots, and immediately refused. "No, that piece of land doesn't exist. This one is good. But there are a lot of grass and small trees there. Maybe there will be someone who Keek likes." Manbao, who wants to exchange sugar with Keek, insists, "I'll open that one." The reason she was looking for was also very valid. Look at how good the grass grows there, and there are trees. In the future, you can also grow beans and melons. Look at the piece you choose, there is only so much grass that grows. It's not better than my choice at all. Oh, there are stones, Zyako doesn't like stones the most, and beans and melons must also be. Thursday Lang was unhappy. "Is it you or me?" Manbao pinched his waist and said, "It's you, but you have to listen to me, or I'll tell Dad when I go back, saying that you deliberately chose a bad piece of land to be lazy and let Dad beat you." Thursday Lang was so angry that he couldn't help but listen to her, because their father would definitely listen to Manbao's words. Touching the wound on his body, Shiro could only snort angrily, "Okay, just open that one, let's go." Wu Wulang was about to carry her, and Manbao thought about it and waved his hand, "No need to carry it, I want to go on by myself. Fourth brother, you go to open up the wasteland first." Thursday Lang was so angry, "How do you get on with your little winter melon? Shouldn't Goro be with you to take care of you?" "What's the matter, the sixth brother can stay." "No, they still have to help me open up wasteland." Wu Lang and Saturday Lang did not want to work either. They shook their heads and said, "My mother told me before I came out, you must take care of my sister. Fourth brother, you go down to mow the grass first, you will take a sickle, it is useless for us to go down." Thursday Lang stayed for a while. "You didn't have a sickle?" Friday Lang smiled, "We have to carry a lot of treasures, how can we have a sickle in our hands?" Thursday Lang looked at Ditou and Dia, and Ditou said smartly, "We thought the uncles brought it, but we didn't." Thursday Lang instructed the big head to say, "Go back now and get the sickle, hurry up." The big head said, "I will go back for breakfast in a while, and I can bring it back after I have eaten. Now that I go back, I won't be able to do much work here, fourth uncle, otherwise we will accompany my sister-in-law down slowly, you first go mow the lawn." Everyone, "That's right, it's the fourth uncle, fourth brother, let's go. On Thursday, Lang felt that he had betrayed his relatives and left, and the culprit was Man Bao. Man Bao was even fiercer than him. Come on, or I'll tell Dad when I go back to dinner, I'll say you're lazy. Thuro turned around and left with his hoe and sickle on his back. Satisfied, Man Bao walked down the mountain road with short legs, grabbing grass and flowers from time to time. Goro, Rokuro, and the big girls are used to playing in the mountains. Seeing Yaome, little sister, I walked honestly, and ran out to play as if it were wild. I saw a beautiful wild flower and picked one. I saw an edible wild fruit. I have to pick and dig it. I can see a nest of ants for a long time. Very happy. Man Bao dug out a handful of grass hard, wiped his face, and asked Keek in his heart, do you want this? There was helplessness in Keek's voice. Host, you have recorded this kind of beef tendon a long time ago. Man Bao doubted, really, why don't I remember? The system calls out the beef tendon grass entered by Man Bao, and it also lists its ecological characteristics, habitat, reproduction method, and main value, etc., all clearly listed one by one. Man Bao likes reading the most, and is happy when she sees the words. She asked excitedly, where did these words come from? The system said, cow's tendon grass still exists in the world of my inventor. This is the knowledge in the encyclopedia. After you enter it, any knowledge points that are included in the encyclopedia will be revealed behind the plants. The system paused and said, Host, I think that even if you can't find extinct or rare species in my inventor's era, you should at least find some precious or high-value plants to enter, so more people will click to download, we can get more points, and I can give you more sugar. Seriously, he has followed Man Bao for more than a year. Except for 3 plants that some people have clicked and downloaded, no one cares about the other plants, and the click-through rate of those 3 plants is not high. He basically uses his own. Points can be exchanged for Man Bao to eat. Man Bao was not disappointed. She was looking at the analysis behind the beef tendon grass with relish. She had already memorized the 1,000-character text, and the day she got the system was the day she got the 1,000-character text manuscript. They are all reciting and recognizing characters. Many characters are not yet written, but she can already recognize them. So after this whole article, Man Bao recognized a number of characters, and she was also polite to ask Keek if she didn't know the words. The system has always answered questions. The key is that Man Bao is also more cute. Who can bear to reject a cute child over 4 years old? No, Man Bao has always insisted that he is 6 years old this year, a virtual age. Man Bao finished reading, but still didn't understand what she meant, but she didn't ask all of them, she basically only asked about topics she was interested in. It is said that beef tendon grass can dispel wind and dampness, clear heat and detoxify, disperse blood stasis and stop bleeding. What's the meaning? Keek, it literally means, Chinese medicine believes that when people eat whole grains and are affected by the environment, there will be dampness and heat toxins in the human body. Dispelling wind and dampness, clearing heat, and detoxifying. As for dispersing blood stasis and stopping bleeding, it is easier to remove blood stasis and stop bleeding. Man Bao let out a wow, this is so precious, no, I need to dig a little more and bring it home. Man Bao grabbed the grass and pulled it up hard, and it took the boss's strength to pull the grass out. The system also thought the grass was pretty good, so it secretly encouraged Man Bao, and thought of a way for her. You can tie them up with the vines next to them and you can take them back. Man Bao thought it was very reasonable and pulled out a lot of beef tendon. When Goro and Rokuro picked a handful of wild fruits, she was covered in mud on her face and sweating profusely. Both teenagers were stunned. He ran up and asked, young sister, what are you doing? Man Bao said with bright eyes, brother fifth, brother six, come and help, I have found a good herb. The 2 teenagers stepped forward and saw the weeds in her hands. They were quite speechless. Isn't this a weed? It can be seen everywhere on the ground. It's not. It's called beef tendon grass. It can detoxify and stop bleeding. Man Bao instructed the two brothers, quickly pull it out with me. However, Goro directly took down the weeds in her hands and threw them away, and then lined up her hands, saying, "Don't be stupid, come, we found a thorn bubble, eat one and have a look." After speaking, he filled Bao Bao's mouth with a bright red fruit. It was fragrant and sweet. Bao Bao's eyes were bright, and he forgot about the beef tendon on the ground. "I want it." The system was also very excited. "This is a plant that has never been recorded before, Manbao, you must include it. I checked it just now, and there is no picture of this kind of fruit in the system." If there is no picture, even if the scientific name is included, they can get a fairly generous reward for adding the picture, which is issued by the encyclopedia. If someone clicks to view the picture, the points will be even more. Sure enough, letting the host go out and walk more is the correct policy. The system said, "Manbao, hurry up and include it, it is best to include the entire plant." Manbao put the wild fruit in his mouth and asked his brother, "What kind of fruit is this? Why have I never eaten it before? Where did you pick it?" Goro and Rokuro asked, "Have you ever eaten it?" "There is a lot on the mountain. During Qingming, there are a lot of them. Now there are very few. If you like it, I will take you up the mountain to eat next year." Manbao felt that the brothers missed the point and asked, "Where did you pick them?" "We've finished picking, no more, let's go down the mountain, the fourth brother will be angry in a while." Manbao pinched his waist in anger. "I'll see what it looks like, next time I'll know how to pick wild fruits." Goro laughed when he heard it. "What's so difficult about that? Follow the road down the mountain, and there are quite a few next to it, but it just didn't work. We'll teach you to recognize it later." Only then did Manbao know that the brothers said that Manchen here is not lying to her, it is really a lot. Lu Lang walked down her back for a while, and Wu Lang pointed to the green vines with many thorns on the side of the road and said, "Here, this is the thorn bubble. It blooms in spring when the weather warms up, and it bears fruit after blooming, and after it turns red. It's delicious and delicious, we'll take you up the mountain to pick it up next year's Qingming festival." Rokuro said, "I think the yellow one is more delicious. It's hard and sour, but it has a lot more flavor than the red one." Goro despised him. "Red is delicious, we all say red is delicious." Rokuro, "It's obviously yellow." Goro, "It's red." Rokuro, "Yellow." Goro, "Red." Manbao saw that the two brothers were quarreling. She had never eaten yellow food, so she couldn't express her opinion, so she slipped off the sixth brother's back and squatted down to look at the vines. Goro and Ruku only glanced at their sister, and seeing that she was just staring curiously, they turned their heads and quarreled intently. "No, theory." Manbao asked Keek in his heart, "Do you want to dig the whole plant, or give you a piece of it?" The system thought for a while and said, "Of course it would be best if the whole plant could be dug in, but it's fine if it's inconvenient to pick a section." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 5. Manbao squatted there looking for a relatively short vine. Tou and Da Ya also came over. Seeing the fifth uncle and sixth uncle were quarreling, Tou and Ertou joined in, while Da Ya and others squatted to Manbao. Beside, ask what she is looking for. Knowing that she wanted to dig a small thorn grass, they were all eager to help her find it, and soon found a thorn grass that had just grown out. Everyone digged the soil with sticks, and it didn't take long. It was pulled out, but the rhizome was too long and was torn off. But everyone doesn't mind. Manbao held it in his hand, because it was still small and had no thorns yet, so everyone was relieved to let her hold it. Everyone does this kind of thing. Da Ya pulled a handful of wild flowers from somewhere and put it on her head, and asked the ant, "Does it look good?" Man Bao looked at her blankly, feeling that it was hard to say she was beautiful, but he didn't want to hurt his eldest niece, so he nodded and said, "The flowers are beautiful." The big girl was overjoyed, and happily jumped away with Arya. At the foot of the mountain, Man Bao slid off Goro's back, and took out a snake bubble from his hand. He didn't eat it, so he stuffed everything into Keek as he walked. For more than a year, Man Bao has learned how to secretly hide things for him under the reminder of Keek. And all the young children would not notice this at all, and the wildflowers on the eldest girl were lost by her at some point. Everyone walked forward for a while. Wulang snorted, looked left and right, and asked curiously, "Why don't you see fourth brother? Didn't Yao Mei refer to this place on the mountain just now?" Everyone looked around and exclaimed, "The fourth uncle is gone." "Wait a minute, listen." Da Ya snorted to make everyone quiet, and only then did she hear a snoring sound. Right next to Man Bao, she took the lead to look away from the grass, and saw Shiro was sleeping soundly on the grass. Man Bao was so angry that he ran up and stepped on his chest, but Chu Yulang didn't even wake up. Man Bao was about to continue to exert his strength, but his head had already pulled a piece of weed and ran up to squat beside him, scratching his nose with the weed. Seeing the curiosity, Man Bao stopped stepping on her brother, squatted beside the big head and asked, "This is useful?" The big head scratched the wild grass on Man Bao's face and asked, "Little ant, is it itchy?" Man Bao couldn't help scratching his face, excitedly, "Itchy, I'll do it." After taking the grass in Big Diou's hand, he did an experiment on Shi Zilang's face. Everyone came together and gathered weeds on Shishulang's face. As a result, he waved his hand, turned over and continued to sleep. This kind of reaction made Man Bao very unhappy, so she threw away the weeds and stopped playing, and shouted directly into Shiro's ear, "Snake!" Chu Yulang sat up, jumped up and turned around, "Where is the snake, where is the snake?" Man Bao glared at him, "Fourth brother, Dad asked you to open up the wasteland, but you are sleeping here. I want to tell Dad and let him beat you." When Chu Yulang saw the chubby Yao Mei, he couldn't help itching his hands and pinched the flesh on her face. "What else are you doing besides complaining?" Wulang immediately knocked off his hand, "Fourth brother, you bullied Yao Mei." Man Bao also felt that her face was a little sore from being pinched, and her eyes were full of tears. She stepped on Shiro Lang's foot and crushed her hard, saying, "I will beat you in addition to complaining. Do you dare to fight back?" Thursal Lang really dare not." Chu Hulang was so angry that his nose almost turned. Man Bao snorted coldly when he saw that he was holding him down, "Get rid of the grass and do the work, fourth brother, I'm here to help you, you know." He has learned a lot of words and languages, and the whole treasure theory is set. Mother said, "Our family has saved 15 taels for 3 years, and that money was originally intended for you and the fifth brother to marry. Daughter-in-law, in the end you lost all the money in the family, and you still owe money to the eldest sister-in-law, the second sister-in-law, the third sister-in-law, and the village elder brother's family. You have to pay all the money back. It doesn't matter if you don't marry a daughter-in-law yourself. The fifth brother must have a daughter-in-law, and there are the elder sister-in-law, second sister-in-law, and third sister-in-law. Is it easy for them to save a little money?" Wu Wulang's face was red, but he still straightened his chest and said, "Fourth brother, I'm 14, and I'm going to say kiss in 2 years. How much can you give the family back?" Thursday Lang was stunned. "Then, do you want me to pay back all that money?" "Of course, who told you to lose money?" Thinking of her sold-out niece next door, Man Bao felt an anger gushing out from her chest and belly, and she waited coldly for Thursday Lang to say, "Gamble money. Those who don't change should cut off their hands and feet and throw them into the mountains to feed the wolves, so that they won't harm others." Shiro couldn't help but take 2 steps back. His body was slightly cold, and he pointed at the little brat with shaking fingers. "You, how can you be so cruel? I'm your fourth brother." The big girl, the second girl, and the third girl are also my nieces. The next time you gamble, and the family can't make it, the casino people will pull them away when they come to the door. When they are finished, it will be my turn, and there are big heads and two heads. They, after selling their nephews and nieces, eldest brother, they have to repay the debt to you for the rest of their lives. Although you are a relative, you only have one, and you cannot harm us so many relatives just because you are one, so. Yeah, and Tio, you hadn't thought about it so much before, but now hearing what my sister-in-law said, their gazes towards Shishulang became a little unkind. Even Goro and Rokuro couldn't help but step forward and stared at Thura. Thursday Lang hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Man Bao, don't talk nonsense, I have made up my mind to change, and I will never bet again." Man Bao snorted coldly, "Then let us see your determination." Yes, look at the determination. So Thursalang could only pick up the sickle and mow the grass under everyone's attention. The others watched in a circle, giving pointers from time to time. "Fourth uncle, there is a lot of grass here, cut here." "Fourth brother, the soil below is thicker, cut here quickly." Manbao and Manbao picked a lot of flowers under the leadership of Dia and Arya, and watched them make a wreath for her to wear on her head. Dia and Arya sighed sincerely, "Little aunt, you are so beautiful." Manbao was happy, "Of course, you are also good looking." Thursal Lang listened and watched, and was furious in his heart, "You guys are here to help, how long will it take me to drive out by myself?" Manbao felt that he was still very diligent, and immediately brought someone forward to help. Seeing that Manbao was moving, the others rolled up their sleeves to help. Wu Lang took over the sickle and was in charge of mowing the grass, while the big head was responsible for transporting the grass out. Wu Lang and Thursday Lang took a hoe to dig the bushes in the ground. Manbao took the rest of the people to pick up stones, and picked out the stones and dead wood in the grass. The stones were placed around the field, and the dead wood was put aside, which could be carried back for firewood later. It is really difficult to open up wasteland. There is everything in the ground, and the grass must be carefully punctured by thorns. The system sees Wei and size, so it does not ask the host to find plants for him again, tomorrow. I just hope that the host will be willing to come out tomorrow. Manbao was tired of looking for stones, so he had nothing to say and chatted with the system. "Keek, have these grasses been recorded?" "No." Manbao was disappointed, "How come you have so many records in your encyclopedia?" Keek said, "These weeds are also very common in the future, and the host may not recognize them. You have recorded these things yourself, but they are relatively short when they are near your house, and they are relatively long here." Manbao was a little embarrassed, "So I recorded it?" Keek said solemnly, "Yes, each time one is included, 1 point will be awarded." This is still an encouragement point for her. If it weren't for her young age and the need for encouragement, the system wouldn't even be able to get this point of encouragement. But that's it, it also has to use some of its own points to buy her candy, because her efficiency is too low. It's also that the Zhou family dotes on her too much. The other children in the family are all free range. They can walk since they were 2 years old. But Manbao was not, she was always carried. While her nephews and nieces were rolling in the mud, she was sitting on the kong at home in clean clothes and being taught to speak. When her nephews and nieces were going to weed and plant the fields, she was being taken to the school to eat rice dumplings. It can be said that she has grown so big that the farthest place she has ever been is under the big banyan tree at the entrance of the village. She is the first on this mountain. Next time. The reason why he was able to go under the big banyan tree was because the old Zhutu had nothing to do during the Chinese New Year, so he took his little girl and went under the big banyan tree to talk to his old friends. Of course, Manbao also has this treatment in the family, because she can always get a penny or two for New Year's money when she walks around. The plants in the village are all the most common. She saw that one plant was pulled out to the system. That year, the system light went to identify the plant for her. It was obviously just pulled and handed to it 1 second ago, and then the next second. One is exactly the same, and the heart of the system is collapsed. Fortunately, Manbao now knows to directly ask the system if there are any new plants that need to be entered, instead of holding a handful of weeds and letting them enter one by one, and then the system helplessly tells her that this plant has been entered. Manbao felt that it was tiring to move stones. She wiped the sweat on her forehead with her small hand and asked the system, "Keek, you are so strange, why is this weed included? You see, we have to get rid of it, really it's so annoying. How long will it take to open up the wasteland?" It is because the technological development of the plane of the host is not in place. In the future, wasteland reclamation will only be done by machines, and although these weeds will still exist in the future, their numbers will be greatly reduced, and some plants have even become extinct. I don't exist anymore, that's why I exist. Manbao's focus was a bit crooked. She opened her mouth in surprise. There are so many grasses, trees, and stones, and they come out after just one walk. What is the machine, can I buy it? The system was silent for a while and then said, "No, this technology is far beyond the technology of the plane, so you can't buy it, and even if you can, host, you don't have points." Manbao blinked and paid attention to the points again. She used to think that the points were useless, didn't they just exchange for candy? She can eat candy without points. Every time her second brother or father goes to the market, she will buy candy for her. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 6. The little friends worked together until the sun was rising, and everyone was too hungry to move. It was estimated that they had to eat breakfast, so they carried their things to go home. Friday Lang is still squatting down to carry the treasure on his back. But Manbao felt sorry for his brother, mainly because he was dirty, sweaty, and smelly, so Manbao insisted on going back by himself. Wu Wulang thought about it. Anyway, most of the way home from here is flat, Manbao should be able to walk, and the old lady should not cut him when she sees it, so she took Manbao's hand and went home with confidence. Along the way, I met a lot of villagers who came home from the fields for breakfast, and now the Zhou family is a hot topic in the village, especially Thursday Lang. When everyone saw them, they first looked at Shiro's buttocks with concerned eyes, and then instructed earnestly, "Shiro, it's not good to gamble, that's the thing that destroys the family. Shiro, you are still young, don't make such mistakes again in the future." I met someone who received some admonitions, and Thursday Lang's face turned green, but he didn't answer, and Goro Ruku also felt ashamed. Only Manbao, she was still young, and she didn't feel ashamed, and she really felt that these uncles and brothers too right. So she came down all the way. Uncle Six is right. If you see my fourth brother drilling into the casino in the future, you will beat him up for my father. When I come back, my father will definitely invite you to eat big meat. Isn't that right, brother Dazu? Next time you go to the county seat, you will stare at my fourth brother. If he is not honest, you will tie him back. My mother will thank you as soon as possible. Seeing that the fourth brother did not speak with a sullen face, Manbao also slapped him. "It's rude, didn't you see your uncle talking to you? Are you still not sincere in repentance and still want to gamble?" Thursday Lang could only thank him with a sad face. Anyone who said anything about him or taught him had to say thank you. When the villagers met, they all said in private that Shiro was probably a prodigal son. In fact, he was still young and could not stand the temptation for a while. So people who originally wanted to kiss him, but gave up the idea, had another thought. If this kid Shiro can improve, he is still a very good young man. He is strong, he does his job well, and his brothers are prosperous and prosperous. Yes, the villagers unanimously felt that the three married husbands of the Zhou family were very promising. They did a good job in the farm work and were also diligent. As long as they were free, they would go to the white landlord's house to do day labor to earn money. Then look at the old man Zhou and Qian's family. They are also first-class hard-working people, and similarly, Shi Zhuolang should not be bad either. Everyone looked at Thursilro with 2 points of tolerance. Thursday Lang didn't realize it, because as soon as he got home, his mother instructed him to chop wood. Now that the autumn harvest is over, the family has to prepare firewood for the winter. In the past, these jobs were dispatched by the three brothers above. The heavy work of chopping wood was always done by the third brother, because he was strong. The unmarried ones under them were responsible for picking up firewood on the mountain and carrying the chopped firewood into the shack. However, because Chu Yulang lost money in the bet, Qian Shi and Lao Zhoutiu discussed it, and transferred the wood chopping to him. This was punishment, and it was also done for several sons and daughters-in-law in the family. There are many children in the family, and the fingers are long and short. The Qian family will definitely not be able to keep a bowl of water level, but the big picture must be decent, otherwise, as long as one of them is noisy, the family will not want to live in peace. Old Zhutu squatted on the threshold with a sullen face, stared at the fourth son to get the axe, and then snorted and looked away. Seeing the little girl, a smile appeared on her face. "Manbao is back, are you having fun?" Manbao nodded happily. "Happy, Dad, have a good time on the mountain, there are a lot of flowers and grass, I have to go in the afternoon." "The sun is shining in the afternoon, you can take a nap at home and let your fourth brother go there," Lao Zhutu said. "If you like flowers, ask your eldest niece and the others to pick them back for you. I'm going to take medicine." Thinking of the black juice that her mother was going to eat, Manbao wrinkled his nose, his whole face wrinkled, as if he was suffering. The old man Zhou looked cheerful, and his mood was finally a little better, so he let his daughter sit in the room and had breakfast in a while. Farmers eat breakfast after a wave of farm work, 2 meals a day. One meal is Sijhan in the morning, and the other is Shenzheng. After dinner, pack up, and you can go to bed after dark. Adults are like this, except for children, like Xiaoqiu, because the days are long, and at night, the family usually cooks a little porridge for the children to eat at night, so as not to make them too hungry. Manbao got into the main room. Qian's health was not good. Yesterday, he was frightened and angry. He was also frightened. Today, he lay on the bed and didn't get up. Seeing the girl covered in grass clippings, she couldn't help laughing. "Have you been having fun?" Manbao made to him and sat on the edge of the bed, looking very well behaved. "Mother, next time I go to the market, I will go with my second brother." "What are you going to do?" "I also want to learn to do business." Qian couldn't help laughing. "You just want to play, right?" Qian thought for a while. When the spring festival was full, he didn't go to the temple fair, and the autumn harvest was over. Thinking of this, Qian Shi agreed, "Let your second sister-in-law take you there, and the big bosses will go too." Yesterday, they were all terrified. Go out to play and calm down. As for doing business and the like, Qian never took it to heart. In her opinion, this is what children say. Manbao doesn't think it's a child's words, she is very serious. So she didn't go to the school to listen to the class after eating breakfast, but brought the fifth and sixth brothers, nephews, and nieces together to work together. Goro reached out and touched his sister's forehead. "It didn't burn, so why are you talking nonsense?" Rokuro smiled and said, "What can we sell in our family?" Manbao shook his head. "No, but it is outside." She pointed to the outside and said, "There are so many beautiful grass and flowers outside, we can all sell them." Everyone. This time even the three heads said, Can't sell it? Why can't you sell it, since he is so smart, such a powerful geek will like these wild grasses and wildflowers, so people outside should like it too. Man Bao was extremely dictatorial and waved his hand. It's decided, we're going to pick flowers, and we're going to pull up weeds to sell. Goro wanted to persuade her, but Rokuro grabbed him and said, listen to Manbao. Young sister is stupid, so are you. Rokuro, I'm not stupid, but if we don't listen to her, can we still go to the market? Goro thought about it and thought it was very reasonable. The market is quite far from their village, and it takes more than half an hour to get there. The last time I went was when I went to the temple fair in spring. The two immediately winked at Datadaya and the others. Everyone understood it, and they happily promised Manbao that they would definitely bring a lot of beautiful weeds and wildflowers to the market that day. Well, let's go to the market first. The title of the book has been changed, but please rest assured, the outline and content have not changed. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 7. After breakfast was ready, a group of children ran out and took their seats. Zhou Dalan sits next to the old head of Zhou, and the little Qian family should sit on the opposite side, but because Man Bao is favored, she has always occupied the position below the Qian family. Little Qian carried the ant to the stool and sat down, then got up and distributed porridge to everyone. Friday Lang and Saturday Lang glanced at the thin porridge and pouted. They used to eat breakfast in the morning. After all, they had to work during the day and only eat thick porridge at night. But the parents were on top, and they didn't dare to say anything dissatisfied. The three older brothers above all handed the bowl to Xiao Qianxi with a sullen face, while Shiro couldn't wait to bury his head in his chest. Mrs. Jian glanced at the fourth uncle, took his bowl, the spoon still floated up a lot, and then gave him a bowl of porridge. If everyone's porridge can still be called porridge, then what's in Shiro's bowl can only be called rice soup. Thursday Lang almost burst into tears. He looked up at his sister-in-law, met her cold gaze, lowered his head and dared not speak. Manbao looked around, thinking that she could still go to school to eat rice crackers at noon, so she poured half of the porridge in the bowl to her father and mother. The old Zhutu and the Qian family were so moved that they didn't even bother to talk about the little Qian family. Everyone ate porridge in silence. They also wanted to be filial, but they were afraid of starvation. Qianxi put the porridge back again and squinted. Manbao eats, and mother doesn't have to work, so she's not hungry. Manbao protected the bowl and said, I don't want to eat, my stomach is small and I'm already full. Seeing that he couldn't beat her, Mrs. Jian gave some of the porridge to her three sons and told them, you have to go out to work and eat more. If you are hungry on the way, find something to fill first, and then pay the village chief's money back. Now, the days at home will be slowed down. The three sons responded. Old Zhou glanced at his wife and said, okay, this is Manbao's filial piety to you, don't give it all to them. Then he said to the second child, tomorrow you go to the market, carry a bag of grain, and return some money. The village chief's money is not in a hurry. After the Chinese New Year, your brothers can always earn some money back, but your mother needs to buy medicine for medicine. I can't leave a penny at home. Tuesday Lang responded in a low voice. Qianxi took the opportunity to say, tomorrow, bring Manbao and the others with you, and the second one's family, you can go with them too, just watch a few children. Weivu Lang and Saturday Lang immediately said, mother, and us, we will also be optimistic about Manbao and Datadaya. Qianxi didn't really want the fifth and sixth to go, so he frowned and said, how's your fourth brother's wasteland going? Weivu Lang's intuition was bad, but it was a pity that he was too far away from Manbao to kick her, so he could only look at her from a distance. Fortunately, Manbao had a good heart with him, raised his head to look at his brother, and then at his mother, and finally said, mother, let the fifth and sixth brothers go together, otherwise I can't watch them. Big Head immediately raised his head. Little ant, I'm older than you don't need to look at me. This one is sitting close, and Friday Lang kicked his head hard. Stinky boy, telling you to break the scene. With a loud ow, he jumped up and shouted, Mother, fifth uncle kicked me. Xiao Qian glared at Wu Wulang, patted the silly son, and twisted him and said, hurry up and eat porridge, you talk a lot, didn't you see your sister-in-law didn't say anything? The big head bowed his head pitifully. Old Zhou Tiou took everything in his eyes, just finished eating the porridge, put down the bowl and said, let them go, they are still children, the big head and the big girl are naughty, the second child may not be able to watch it, let the fifth the sixth follow, don't lose the child. The fourth continues to open up the wasteland. Old Zhou Tiou glared at Shiro Lang, who was working hard, and set a deadline, I'll give you a month. If you can't make an acre of land, don't even eat porridge. Shiro was so miserable in his heart. However, Manbao still stabbed a knife in his heart, and sat next to him after the meal and asked, fourth brother, do you know why you're where you are now? She asked herself, it's because you gamble. Thura. Lord Manbao sighed angrily, and patted his shoulder with his small hand, everyone who gambles money is a villain. I know such a simple truth, why don't you know? Manbao, we're going to school. MRSGN put all the vegetables in the basket, and wanted to put Manbao in the back basket to carry, but Manbao shook his hand and raised his neck proudly, sister-in-law, I have already when you grow up, don't carry it. Little Qian couldn't help but be amused, has our Manbao grown up? Yes, I am 6 years old. Shiro, who was so saddened by her words, directly stretched out his hand and ruffled her short hair and laughed, it's still 6 years old, you are not even 5 years old, do you know what a birthday is? Manbao was shaken unsteadily by him, and shouted loudly. Before she could raise her head, Thursday Lang let go and ran away. Manbao's hair was messed up, and he burst into tears with a wow in anger. Xiao Qian was frightened. The sister-in-law seldom cried, and she didn't cry much since she was 1 year old. Seeing her crying so badly, Xiao Qian was stunned for a moment before hugging her. In the room, Qianxi threw down the sewing basket, jumped out of bed with flexible hands and feet, and ran out with half-wearing shoes. What's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong with my baby? Manbao felt aggrieved for a while, but after crying for the first time, it was almost all right. She was already aggrieved, but when she saw Qian, she didn't know what was wrong, and she felt even more aggrieved. She cried and rushed into her mother's bed. In his arms, he complained, Mother, the fourth brother bullied me, you see him messing with my hair. Qianxi immediately straightened her messy hair. She was so angry that she directly ordered, this stinky brat really can't be beaten. Don't cook his meals at night, make him hungry. There is nothing wrong with the little Qianxi, and he immediately responded loudly. Qianxi felt sorry for her daughter, wiped her tears, and said, okay, we won't cry anymore, mommy will boil eggs for you, okay. Little Qian asked, then why don't you go to school? Don't go, I will cook eggs for Manbao and cook rice to eat. Xiao Qian felt a little bit of pain, but when she thought that my sister-in-law was made to cry this time, she should be coaxed. She nodded and agreed, but Manbao was unwilling and broke away from her mother's arms and said, no, I'm going to school. Her reasons are also very good, I'm going to the market tomorrow, and I can't go to the school to listen to the class. I have to tell Mr. Zhuang. Xiao Qian said, don't worry, little ant, I will help you tell Mr. Zhuang. No, I said it myself, and today I'm going to see if Mr. Zhuang's manuscript is finished. I have to bring it back when it's done. Then. Little Qian looked at Qian hesitantly. Seeing that her daughter was no longer sad, Qian touched her little face and said with a smile, okay, go if you want. Man Bao turned around and happily went to school with Xiao Qian. As soon as the two sisters-in-law left, Mrs. Jian stood up from the ground, her face sank, and said to the two daughters-in-law and two young sons who were watching, "Go and bring back the fourth son, it's really against him. If you have the ability to do things outside, gamble and lose money, and have the ability to come back and bully the family." The four listened to the order, and the whole village went to arrest Shiro. As soon as Man Bao arrived at the school, she lay on the window and listened to Mr. Zhuang's class. Today they were talking about the Analects of Confucius. Before, Man Bao had heard a few sentences, but she had not memorized it systematically. This is a big class, and all the children have learned the Analects of Confucius, so it starts from the first class. Man Bao listened to the whole process, but Mr. Zhuang only taught everyone to recite repeatedly in this class, and did not explain the meaning of the scriptures. Man Bao didn't even have a book, so she just followed along in a confused way. She has always had a good memory. She only remembered it after reading it back and forth 3 or 4 times, but she didn't know the specific words, let alone the meaning. Seeing that Mr. Zhuang is still teaching these back and forth. As usual, Man Bao would continue to memorize with great interest, but today she was in a bad mood and was affected a little, so she couldn't concentrate. She felt that after she carried it on her back, she slipped off the windowsill and secretly ran to Mr. Zhuang's yard. Mr. Zhuang's study is never closed, and I don't know if it is a habit, or for the convenience of a child who always sneaks in to clean for him. Man Bao wandered around in the yard and the study, and finally sat on the steps, resting his chin in a daze, actually talking to the system. "Keek, do you think fourth brother hates me?" The system said, "Host, no one in this world will always be liked, that is, money is always hated by others. But I'm not money, I'm the fourth brother's sister, how can he not like me?" The system was silent for a while and then said, "In this world, it is normal for fathers to hate their children, mothers to hate their children, and siblings to hate each other. Nonsense, how can there be parents who don't like their children in this world? Don't brothers and sisters want friendship and help?" That's the host's wishful thinking. The system felt that it might be too lonely, so it would say this to the little host, but it felt that it was also laying the foundation for his safety and future development. If his host was too naive, then he will be really worried in the future. So after searching in the encyclopedia, he found a book called Top 10 Evil Fathers in History and gave it to Man Bao, saying, "Host, this is what I borrowed from you. It costs points to borrow books. Remember to pay me back when you earn points." A book suddenly appeared in Man Bao's hand, her eyes were shining, she had long since put aside the hurt her fourth brother had done to her, and asked happily, "Is this for me?" The system emphasized, "This is lent to the host to see, and it will be returned after reading it." Man Bao was very moved. "Kiko, you are so kind, this is my first book." The system emphasized again, "Host, you have to pay it back after reading it, or you will have to deduct a lot of points." Man Bao was very arrogant and waved his little hand, "Come on, buying books also costs a lot of money." System, "Host, you have no points." Man Bao has already lowered his head to turn over the book. The text on the book was replaced by the text of this era. Man Bao already knew many words, and it was written in vernacular, so she read it with relish, just like reading a story book. In fact, this is also a story book about the top 10 scumbags in history. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 8. Although Man Bao can recognize a lot of words, she still can't understand stories that are too complicated. She can only understand these stories by feeling. Fortunately, these books are different from the books on Mr. Zhuang's bookshelf, because they are written in vernacular. As long as you know the words and read the whole book, you may not understand all of them, but you can probably understand the story. Man Bao was excited, holding the book with relish. The beginning of the book is a preface, which says that these stories are anecdotes passed down in ancient history, some are true, some are false, and some are half-truths. But whether it is true or not, the stories are evaluated differently in each era. This book aims to study the ideology at that time and the evolution of ideology through the different evaluations of these stories in each era. Man Bao was still young, so he could understand every word in this preface, but he couldn't read it together. She worked hard to write most of the chapter, but she really couldn't understand it, so she turned back and turned to the story. Still a good story. Although he wrote about the scumbag, he didn't see the misery at first. The first story was the 10th-ranked emperor, an emperor named Kangxi. What he was talking about was that he raised his sons like a goo, and in order to ensure his rights, he deliberately let his sons fight each other to strike a balance. Man Bao didn't see how the father was so bad at first. He just read it as a story, and the system reminded her, look at the fate of his sons, aren't they all miserable? Man Bao was stunned for a moment and asked, they are all princes and emperors, what's wrong with them? Keek gave him an analysis, look, they are princes, but most of them were banned and exiled in the end. Do you know what confinement and exile are? Man Bao said confidently, I don't know. The system choked for a moment, and explained to her in detail the confinement and exile. In the final analysis, it was going to jail and serving a sentence. Man Bao was stunned, my father is the emperor, and my brother is the emperor. Are they still going to jail? Keek said, that's why you say it's a scumbag. Man Bao pouted, and felt that this father was really not very good. She read it back and forth twice, and also figured out the meaning of the story. This is actually a father who wants to keep his rights. For the sake of balance, he deliberately let his sons fight. In the end, he banned 3 sons. Then he chose one son to be the emperor, and the emperor's son circled a few more. One and a few were exiled, so his sons were miserable. Man Bao didn't like this story very much, and reading it gave her a headache. There were several people's names in it that she didn't recognize, so she pointed to Keek. Keek said, not only taught her how to read the word, but also explained the meaning of the word by the way. Man Po turned to the next story and cried. This father is much worse than the previous father, because he actually starved his daughter to death, just because his daughter took a piece of cake from the neighbor. Man Bao was still a kind-hearted child. She cried aloud and said angrily to Keek, this father is really bad, why is he still a high-ranking official? Keek, generally speaking, human beings have diverse behaviors, and there is no exclusivity between an honest official and a scumbag, so a person can be an honest official and a scumbag at the same time. However, this story was considered fictional in ancient times. This involves another human behavior, that is, for the benefit of a certain party, you can make up stories that echo your own interests. You are still young, and when you grow up a little, you will understand if you read more books. Human beings can even distort the language of the saints for the sake of profit, and this kind of thing is nothing. Man Bao was confused and half understood. Although he knew the story was made up, the story was so well written that Man Bao decided to hate him. The little girl was about her age, so she starved to death. What a pain. Man Bao cried so much that his eyes were red. When Mr. Zhuang came back from get out of class, the system swept the person to the door, and immediately confiscated the book in Man Bao's hand, so Mr. Zhuang seemed to see Man Bao sitting on the steps alone, crying, with red eyes. Mr. Zhuang's grandson is also a little older than Man Bao, and he likes her the most on weekdays. He felt extremely distressed for a while, so he walked 2 steps forward and asked softly, Man Bao, who bullied you? Man Bao wiped his tears and grabbed Mr. Zhuang's sleeve, raised his head and asked, Sir, are you a good father? Mr. Zhuang was stunned for a moment, and after thinking for a moment, he said, Man Bao, my grandson is older than you. Even in terms of seniority, it should be grandpa. You, sir, are there many bad fathers in this world who just bully children? Mr. Zhuang asked, did your father scold you? Man Bao shook his head, my dad treats me well, he's not a bad dad. Mr. Zhuang breathed a sigh of relief, looked at Man Bao, and knowing that she was still young, he sat beside her and asked patiently, then why do you ask such a thing? I saw a story that there was an innocent official who had little food at home, and his daughter was hungry. The neighbor gave her a piece of cake when he saw it, and his daughter ate it. Locked up and starved to death. Mr. Zhuang twitched his cheeks and said, how can there be such an official? Man Bao insisted, that's right, the book also said that it was an era when there were very strict requirements for girls. What kind of shape was in that era when girls showed their ankles and told foreign men to marry each other when they saw them? If you can't marry, you'll have to commit suicide. Mr. Zhuang frowned, even though he knew that he couldn't be honest with children, such a book should not be read by children of this age, lest it spoil their temperament. But the other party has seen that Mr. Zhuang can only refute the content of the book. Yes, such an official is also a person who is famous for his reputation. He is known as an honest official, and his name is not true. It's just a piece of cake. Blocks are. As for the matter of the outsider, it's even more nonsense. The outsider is what I am to you, and the students in the school are to you. Although there are differences between men and women, it is not enough to strictly guard against this level. If there is, that's not a lunatic, it's a devil. Mr. Zhuang said, the latter is crazy, and I really think so. The former did it on purpose, using my daughter's life for a reputation. You can hide as far as you want from such a person in the future. But I never did. Heard such a story, where did you read it, so that he could confiscate it? Man Bao immediately said, it's a book called The 10 Evil Fathers in History. Since it's history, it must have been recorded. I don't know which dynasty and generation the honest official you just mentioned belonged to. People from the Jiajing period of the Ming dynasty. Mr. Zhuang couldn't help laughing out loud. He touched her little head and said, it can be seen that all the characters have been made up. How can there be a Ming dynasty in this world? Man Bao blinked, but still believed in Keek, and asked it in his heart, Keek, even history doesn't exist. You lied to me. The system that had been silent for a long time actually produced a pleasant emotion. It said, no, host, your space is not bright. It does not mean that other spaces are not now, it does not mean that there will be no future, just like me, now this space, this era, and only you own me, but in the era when my inventor lived, I was not uncommon. I dare not say that one person has one, but as long as you have the money and are willing to buy it, everyone can buy one. Man Bao seemed to understand, but she still summed up her own understanding, that is, Keek didn't lie, but what Mr. Zhuang said was also right, so she decided to listen to both. She looked up at Mr. Zhuang and asked, Sir, do you know any bad dad in our history? Mr. Zhuang asked, why are you interested in this? You know, the son never speaks to the father. Even if there is something wrong with the father, very few people will publicize the matter to the world, making the father lose face and the family as well. If you lose your face, what good will it do to yourself? When Man Bao was stunned, Mr. Zhuang simply took this to give her a courtesy, and after a while, he said, Man Bao, you are a smart child, I know you love to read. If that's the case, then study hard. 1,000 words you have finished studying the texts, now it is time to study the Analects, and when the Analects is finished, the teacher will teach you about the rites. Man Bao was stunned, and the system couldn't help reminding her, host, thank you teacher soon. Man Bao recovered and immediately knelt to the ground, sir, teacher. Man Bao kowtowed at Mr. Zhuang. As soon as Mr. Zhuang said his words, he regretted for a moment, but seeing her kneeling on the ground and calling him a teacher with a happy face, that trace of regret disappeared again. Forget it, although she is a female apprentice, she is smart and cute, so let's talk about it for comfort. Mr. Zhuang helped the child up and said, "Go back and tell your parents what happened today." "Why, didn't the teacher never let me tell my parents what happened here?" Mr. Zhuang touched her head and said, "Since you have been asked to kneel, you must be justifiable." Mr. Zhuang touched her head and sighed softly, forgetting that he was going to confiscate her book. "The first time I saw Man Bao, she was just a little girl who could just stand up against the wall. It seemed that she was only 8 or 9 months old and could barely stand up against the wall. Xiao Jian came to cook, because she just took this job, and she cherished it very much. She always came early, not only to clean the inside and outside, but also to chop wood and fire for cooking and cooking. Therefore, he could not help neglecting this child. At that time, Man Bao climbed to the threshold of the classroom, turned over and hugged the door to listen to his lecture. At first, Mr. Zhuang was a little angry and felt that Xiao Jian could not do anything, so he put down the book and hugged her and went to Xiao Jian. She wanted to let Xiao Jian take care of her child, but she saw that she was chopping firewood with an axe and sweating profusely. Mr. Zhuang will be invited by the landlord to teach in such a mountain village. Naturally, his family is not rich. In fact, he is so poor. In his memory, his mother took him like this, so Mr. Zhuang hesitated for a while, didn't call Xiao Jian, turned around and carried Man Bao back, and let her sit on the threshold. Fortunately, this child is also good, she sits on the threshold, she doesn't cry or make trouble, she eats whatever she gives, and when she sees the students reading aloud, she also talks to herself. Later, the first word she said was "sir," which Mr. Zhuang insisted on. This child is really smart. As soon as the 1-year-old child can speak, she reads Xiandi Xianhuang with the students. The youngest student he taught was 6 years old. He read it 10 times, remembered it, and then forgot it the next day, but this child's little head remembered it very clearly. Of course, she can only shout, but does not recognize words. So Mr. Zhuang copied 1,000-character script and gave it to her. Later, Mr. Zhuang liked her even more, because he found that Man Bao not only endorsed and memorized quickly, but also remembered words quickly. After facing it a few times, she can remember that word. Such a smart, cute, and kind child, how can he not be a boy? Mr. Zhuang regretted more than once. Then he couldn't help but teach her to read, teach her principles, and specially found some books to practice calligraphy, and then gave her the manuscript for her collection. Although the words of accepting her as a disciple came out suddenly, her thoughts were not a day or two, it was just because she was a girl, so she hesitated. In fact, he is just a scholar who was dropped out of the government school. His knowledge is limited, so why should he care too much about those false names? Do you really want to make a name for himself like the bad father she calls him? Mr. Zhuang rubbed Man Bao's head harder, and said with determination, "Go to your sister-in-law now, and let your parents choose a good day to bring you home." Man Bao walked away in confusion. This chapter has been revised according to the suggestions of book friends, so please don't misunderstand because of some changes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 9. Man Bao ran to find her sister-in-law with short legs, and Keek watched the whole process without saying a word. Sister-in-law Zhou was obviously startled, and repeatedly asked Man Bao what Mr. Zhuang said at the time. After she was sure, she put the things on the stove after a little thought, and said, "Go, sister-in-law will take you home first, and I'll clean up later." Man Bao's memory is very good, and it happened just now. Of course, she said it clearly, but Lao Zhutu still asked 3 times, and then squatted on the threshold and took out shredded tobacco from his waist pocket. Stuffed into the cigarette rod and did not speak. No one said a word. MRSGN said to MRSGN, "You go to work first. It's not a small matter. We will have to wait for the boss and the others to come back before we can decide." Xiao Qian responded and went to the school to continue working. Qian Shi glanced at Lao Zhutu, took Man Bao's little hand into the house, and looked down at her. Seeing her round face full of blankness, she knew that she probably didn't understand the meaning. After thinking about it, Qian asked, "Man Bao, do you want to study?" Man Bao said, "I've been reading all the time. I've already learned 1,000 characters. Mr. Zhuang said that he can teach me the analects, and I can count to 100. Qian touched her little head. "Do you like reading?" Man Bao nodded and said happily, "I like it, reading is fun. When I'm in a good mood, reading 1,000 characters is like singing, and I feel better. When I'm not happy, I also read 1,000 characters words, and then I was happy when I read it." Qian's eyes were a little vague, and he didn't know what to think. After a while, he said, "It's such a pity." Man Bao climbed onto the bed, sat next to his mother, raised his head and asked, "Mother, what a pity." "It's a pity you're not a boy." Man Bao pouted, "I don't want to be a boy. Boys are dirty and smelly, and girls are not as pretty." Qian couldn't help but smile. "Yeah, our treasures are clean and fragrant. But boys can pass on the lineage." Qian Shi thought that his heart was hard enough, but at this time, he couldn't help crying. Man Bao looked very distressed, and quickly wiped her tears. His eyes couldn't help turning red. He asked with a crying voice, "Mother, why are you crying? Do you not like me to study?" "Well, then I go a little later." Qian Shi couldn't help laughing out loud, wiping her tears while wringing her nose and saying, "What a slick little guy, like your father, he can say nice things to coax people." Man Bao opened his mouth wide. It was hard to imagine that her father turned out to be that kind of father. Qian Shi was only sad for a moment, and hugged her and said, "Since you can read, then read. There are many benefits to reading. Although you are a girl, you are better than others when you read, and you will not be deceived or cheated by others in the future. Damn, you can make your life better." Although Qian was illiterate, even a village woman who had never been out of the county, she had her own knowledge. She whispered, "Look at those men, those who can read are better off than those who are illiterate. Counting is smarter than ignorant ones, and so are girls." Man Bao nodded fiercely. "Mr. said that reading can be sensible. That idiot, said that he didn't take the imperial examinations, and he would inherit his father's land to collect rent and live in the future, and the husband said that the person who is reasonable, no matter where you go, you will not feel guilty, you will do well, you can." The next words are a bit difficult. Man Bao paused for a while, but Keek reminded her before she could continue, "You can be invincible, your heart is undefeated, and your people are undefeated." Although Man Bao didn't understand these words very well, she felt that Mr. Zhuang was so tall at the time, and she blushed when she heard it. Living. She looked at her mother with bright eyes and said, "Mother, I want to study, and I have to be reasonable." Looking at her serious face, MRSGN almost wanted to answer her, but thinking of the current predicament of the family, MRSGN still kept all the words in her heart. So let's listen to the advice of the boss. Zhou Dalin and the others came back at the hour of dinner. At this time, the sun was about to set, but everyone was too hungry. After all, there was only porridge for breakfast. Everyone simply washed their hands and sat down at the dinner table. Old Zhutu was not in a hurry to talk about business. After everyone had finished eating, he sat down in the courtyard and called the eldest, second, and third to speak to him. MRSGN glanced out, frowned slightly, grabbed the rag and said nothing. On Tuesday, MRS Feng also glanced at the yard, and couldn't help but whispered, Father-in-law doesn't really want my aunt to read, right? He frowned and said, no way, how much will it cost, sister-in-law, will my mother-in-law agree? Xiao Qian was holding onto the rag. She didn't really want her aunt to go to school, but she brought her home at noon. In fact, when she heard the news at noon, the first thing she felt was happiness. My sister-in-law could be accepted as an apprentice by Mr. Zhuang, and she would be more promising in the future. But when she returned to the school again, she thought that it costs money to study. Even if Mr. Zhuang accepts apprentices in private, and does not accept aunt's bridal repairs, the ceremony for apprenticeships cannot be neglected, and he has to take the ceremony during the festivals. These are all small heads. If you read books, you should buy books. In fact, Mr. Zhuang's school was not very well received, because the majority of the money was paid by the white landlords, but before the Zhou family lost in the bet on Thursday, the Zhou family had not been able to send any of their grandchildren to the school. One of the reasons was that the family is still too thin to afford a reader. This was unaffordable before, and it is even more unaffordable now. In addition, their mother-in-law also has a medicine jar at home. She has to drink medicine every month, and the burden is even heavier. These thoughts washed away Xiao Qian's initial joy, and now only worry is left. Of course, what Xiao Qian can think of, the other men in the Zhou family are of course more thoughtful, especially the head of the family, the old Zhou Tiaoyu. He originally did not want Man Bao to study, but his wife and Man Bao said in the room in the afternoon. The words made him hesitate. When it was time for dinner, he watched Man Bao holding a large bowl with two small hands, almost burying his little head in the bowl, and eating a bowl of thin white porridge with relish. Looking at the three daughters-in-law next to him who were about to clear the table, wash the dishes, and clean as soon as they put down the dishes, the balance in Lao Zhutu's heart slowly shifted to the other side. His Man Bao is weak, white, fat, and cute. He is spoiled by his father and brother at home, but what about 10 years later, 15 years later? At that time, would she also marry a farmer like her brothers and become a farmer woman like her sister-in-law? Old Zhou Tiaoyu took 2 puffs of cigarettes, choked on it, and then took out the bong and knocked it. He said, "You all know the matter, tell me, what are your thoughts?" Tuesday Lang and Wednesday Lang looked at each other, lowered their heads and said, "Let's listen to Dad and Big Brother." Old Zhou Tiaoyu glanced at the two of them and looked at Zhou Dalin. "Dalin, you say?" Zhou Dalin gritted his teeth and said, "Since Mr. Zhuang is willing to accept her, then let's make an offering. When she grows up, if she can marry into the town, she won't have to beg for food like us." "Yes," Lao Zhutu patted his thigh, "that's what I thought. How many girls in this world can read and count, and you can count, among the children in the family, who is the smartest? It's hard to count how big the eggs are, but Man Bao can count them once. We Man Bao are good looking, and they will definitely look better when they grow up, not to mention the town, maybe even the county can get married." On Tuesday, Lang tangled, "That's what I said, but it costs a lot of money to study. She is still a girl and can't take the exam to become an official." Under the gaze of his father, Zhou Lang's voice gradually decreased, and he could only poke the third child. Wednesday Lang said, "I listened to my father and elder brother." Zhou Dalin /U0026 amp, Tuesday Lang. The old Zhutu couldn't help but took another puff of cigarette, and said, "Mr. Zhuang will definitely not collect a bundle full of treasures, so we will give a teacher or something." On Tuesday, Lang said, "Then the book and pen, ink, paper, and inkstone have to be bought. Can't Mr. Zhuang accept Man Bao as his apprentice? These things have to be provided by Mr. Zhuang." "Dad, I don't know how much these things cost. No one in the family has read books, and they don't know the exact price, but books, pens, ink, and paper are very expensive." And this is precisely one of the reasons why Lao Zhutu was most hesitant. He smoked with a calm head and said nothing. Joe Dallin had blue veins protruding on his hand, gritted his teeth and said, "Dad, Man Bao is a good boy, Mr. Zhuang also knows the situation of our family, I will ask him, which book they want to learn now, we will just buy a copy. She is still young now, and she doesn't need to practice calligraphy with paper and ink, and when she grows up a little later, she should save a little money at home." Seeing the eldest son speak, old Joe took a long breath and nodded, "Okay, just do it like this. You and I will go to apprenticeship with Man Bao the day after tomorrow, and then discuss it with Mr. Zhuang." On Tuesday, Lang opened his mouth and didn't say anything else, but he was worried. He was 46, and he was about to say kiss. The original plan was to marry him a daughter-in-law for the new year, so that he could go to the ground together in the spring. But he gambled money and ruined the family's money, and his reputation was ruined. It is estimated that he will not be able to marry a wife within 3 years. But the fourth child can get married a few years later, which is what he deserves, but what about the fifth child? The fifth child is also 14, and in 2 years' time, they will have to say marriage. The cost of marriage is a lot, not to mention that their mother has to take medicine. Of the 6 brothers in the family, the 3 who are not married are not counted, the 3 who are married, the eldest is stable, but not smart enough, and the third is the most honest person. The second child is a little more clever, and because he often goes to the market to sell some things, he thinks and wants a little more than the first one. Originally, as soon as the gamble happened, he made a calculation in his heart. After 3 or 2 years, how could the family save 3 or 4 hanging money, and then borrow a little more for the fifth to talk about marriage? After the fifth, it is the turn of the fourth and sixth. After the 3 little ones have finished talking, the family will have to be in extreme poverty for at least another 10 years, and then the big head will have to start talking. He originally planned to work well together at home. His parents were there, and his brothers worked together. In fact, he could make money faster than his own. Although his younger brother, nephew, and his son will marry each other, he may never see any spare money in his life, but at least there will be no shortage of food and clothing. But if Man Bao reading is added to this plan, then the family really has no money left. On Tuesday, Lang scratched his head, and finally said with a headache, "Forget it, anyway, the family is run by the parents, and they are the ones who are bothered. Now he just needs to be obedient and take care of his own little family." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 10. Old Zhutu decided to let his daughter worship Mr. Zhuang as a teacher. Of course, he had to prepare well. So even the boss didn't go out to work the next day. Old Zhutu directly asked him to borrow a cart from the village chief and take out 2 bags of grain from the warehouse. The whole family stood at their respective doors and watched. The old Zhutu didn't seem to see the anxiety in the eyes of his daughters-in-law, so he ordered the eldest and the third to tie up the grain, and then explained to Mr. Zhou, "Go to the Jishang, and exchange the grain for money first, buy 3 days' worth of medicine for your mother, and then buy another piece of meat, pork belly, if you can buy bacon, it will be even better." Old Zhutu thought for a while and then said, "Look at the market to see if there are any better cotton cloth sold in the market, if there are, buy them back and make a set of clothes for Mr. Zhuang, by the way, don't forget the fabric of the shoes and socks. Buy it, buy something better." Tuesday Lang wrote down one by one. When Xiao Jian and the others heard what they wanted to buy, their hearts twitched. "These are 2 bags of grain." Old Zhutu was more distressed than them, but listening to the laughter floating in from outside, he could ignore this distress. Seeing that all the explanations had been explained, old Zhutu waved his hand and told everyone what to do. Man Bao woke up early in the morning, and then dragged Goro Rokuro to pick wildflowers. When the home was ready, they were ready too, and they happily followed behind the adults with a basket made by Tuesday Lang filled with weeds and wildflowers. Feng Shi, who went with them, looked at the things in their basket and couldn't help but say, What are you doing with these things? Ya said, my aunt said she wants to sell it. Feng's eyes widened slightly, this kind of thing is everywhere, who buys it? Man Bao was being carried by Wu Wulang at this time, and he heard the words and said loudly, second sister-in-law, I will buy it, and I am willing to buy beautiful things. This is a real loser. Feng Shi couldn't help but ask, Auntie, are you rich? Man Bao shook his head honestly, not now, but there will be in the future. She is very confident in herself, even Keek said she is very smart, then she must be very powerful, and of course there is no problem with making money. Feng Shi didn't stop them either, he just regarded this as a children's game, and they were holding the things themselves anyway. When they got to the market, everyone started looking for places to set up stalls. On Tuesday, Lang made a lot of baskets and waited for the dustpan to be sold. He took up a piece of land, put the things down and let his wife sell them, and told Wu and Saturday Lang, you guys are watching Manbao and Data closely, don't run around. Before Wu Lang could speak, Manbao first patted his chest and said, second brother, don't worry, I will definitely be optimistic about the nephews, we are not going anywhere. On Tuesday, Lang smiled and reached out and touched her head. Then he pushed the cart and Joe Dallin to sell food. This market is held every 5 days. Several nearby villages gather together to form a market in this relatively large Dali village. Because there is a mountain here, there is a Taoist temple on the mountain, and there are several Taoist priests in the temple. Every year on the 19th of the first lunar month, there is a particularly grand temple fair here, and even some people in the county will come from thousands of miles to participate. That is the big temple fair, and the other small temple fairs are set up on major solar terms. These traditions have been around for many years. According to what Man Bao heard from the elderly at the entrance of the village, these customs have been practiced since they were children. For this reason, Keek also regretted that it was a popular science system for collecting creatures. There is also a system in their encyclopedia that specifically collects this kind of folklore. With the formation of this temple fair, I don't know how many subtasks can be derived. You must earn a lot of points. At that time, Man Bao felt that Keek was a little sad, so he didn't want to throw the money away, but I like Keek, I don't like other systems. In short, this is a big market where villagers communicate with each other. So the question is, do you all barter with money? Of course not. Seeing that the second sister-in-law had set up the basket, dustpan, etc., Man Bao immediately put down their basket full of weeds and wildflowers, forming a row with Feng's products, and then squatted behind and looked at the people passing by with their small faces. On Tuesday, Lang has been operating in the market for many years, and his reputation has long been lost, so not long after the things were put down, an old lady came up with a basket on her back, checked the dustpan and asked, can I exchange it for eggs? Feng Shi agreed after a little thought, and said, is it still 2 cents for 3 eggs? The old lady should be. Feng Shi began to calculate how many eggs she would give her, then you give me. She calculated it, and felt that she was wrong, and her forehead was sweating. In the past, all these things were done by her husband, and she always calculated money when she sold things. Feng Shi wiped off his sweat, and seeing that her sister-in-law was stumped, Man Bao hurriedly jumped up, second sister-in-law, I will, is our family's dustpan still 15 cents apiece? Feng knew that my aunt was smart and could count. She liked to play with her husband a game of how much money is equal to 1 penny plus 2 penny, so she nodded again and again, yes, the price of our family never changes. Man Bao looked at the old lady curiously, where are your eggs? The old lady didn't know how to count herself, but before she went out, her family gave her the eggs she needed to charge, but she still hoped that the Zhou family could make a mistake. Just now, she hurried up when she saw that Tuesday Lang was not there. She put down the basket and opened it to show Man Bao her eggs, it's all laid by the chickens at home, all right. Man Bao said, let me count. The old lady was not very happy. You haven't told me how many eggs I want. Man Bao stared and asked, I haven't counted, how do I know how many eggs I want? I have to count. As soon as I heard this, I knew it was a no-brainer. The old lady was happy and didn't stop her. She smiled and said, then you have to be careful not to break the eggs. Man Bao assured, don't worry, it's mine if it breaks. She took the eggs out of it, 3 piles, and 8 piles. The old lady counted the eggs, and she was about to take the eggs back. Man Bao clapped his little hands and said happily, count it out, second sister-in-law, look, this is 2 texts, this is 2 texts, 2 texts, 2 texts, a total of 16 texts. The stall owner opposite watched the whole process and said happily, this little girl is really smart. Feng Shi and Yuranjian said, this is my sister-in-law, she is the smartest in our family. Friday Lang and Saturday Lang were also very proud, puffing out their chests and saying, my sister. The old lady glanced at these 2 big and strong boys, and swallowed the words in her mouth, then said, your dustpan is 15 cents, but you asked me for an extra cent, so I will put this pile away. Man Bao thought it was reasonable, so he took the initiative to take the 2 smallest eggs from the pile of eggs and gave them to her, saying, 15 when, I should give you 1½ eggs, but half an egg cannot be divided, so we lose a little, these 2 take it back. The old lady choked. Feng Shi also saw the old lady's action, and answered with a smile, quickly put the eggs into their basket, smiled and asked the old lady to choose the dustpan she liked, and said, we don't choose the size of the eggs. Well, just change it. Although she didn't suffer, the old lady was still a little unhappy. Looking at Man Bao, she said, this child is fat and white, and he doesn't look like we were born in a village. Feng said with a smile, the youngest sister-in-law in the family is the youngest, her parents-in-law loves her dearly, and her brothers also love her, so they are carefully raised. I am not boasting. There is no better-looking girl in this 10-mile 8 village than our sister-in-law. Everyone looked closely, it was true. This child not only has cute facial features, but also is white and fat, with a round face and a blush. At first glance, he is a blessed person. The old lady's concern disappeared, and she nodded with a smile, it's good looking. Man Bao was praised, and immediately became happy, and then enthusiastically introduced his products to the old lady, Auntie, look at my things too, look at my flowers, they look so good, take them back and put them on the windowsill, it looks good. The old lady was called Auntie, and her intuition was much younger. She said happily, give it to me. You see how polite you are. Reach for it. Man Bao said with bright eyes, it's not a gift, it's not expensive at all. The old lady withdrew her hand with a squeak, and asked with wide eyes, what, this wildflower still needs money, isn't it all on the mountain? Yes, Man Bao said confidently, but I took it off. Feng hurriedly said, don't mind, Auntie, this is the children's jokes. They clamored to do business at home, so I brought them out to see and see. The old lady felt better now, but she didn't reach out for the flower again, for fear that Man Bao would ask her for money. So I picked a dustpan and hurriedly left. Man Bao watched her leave with a nostalgic expression, and sighed with his friends, why don't you buy them, our flowers are so beautiful. Friends, we had already expected it, so we have no regrets at all. The little friends watched the people coming and going on the street with great interest, and they were very happy to be able to come to the market. One after another, people came to buy baskets and dustpans. Man Bao helped the second sister-in-law to settle the bill every time, and after the calculation, he recommended his own flowers and plants. At first, every adult was happy to reach out to pick it up, and then immediately retracted his hand when he knew that he wanted money. Seeing that it was halfway through the market day, the eldest brother and the second brother did not come back. Not a single one of their flowers could be sold, and the flowers were still a little embarrassing. Man Bao looked worried and sighed, seeing that there were not many dustpans left in front of the second sister-in-law, but there were still quite a few baskets left, so she arranged her flowers and plants in the basket. Looking at Feng Shi's heart skipping a beat, "Sister-in-law, you won't ask the guests to buy your flowers and plants when they buy a basket, right?" He just felt that he couldn't sell it, and the flowers and plants were wasted. Man Bao, who planned to give them away, lit up. "Yeah, second sister-in-law, you are so smart, why didn't I think of this method?" Feng wanted to sew up his own mouth.